Hey guys, everything doing in the sun here? So what I got today is got some knotty pine here, and I'm going to be making a bread box because we need a. I had a plastic bread box I think I bought off Amazon. We used it for a good couple of years, probably 3 years before it broke, and we always make our own bread in the bread machine. We never buy bread from the store, and so we know exactly what goes into it. And it's one of those homesteading things. But one of the problems is you got to keep the bread fresh because everybody knows homemade bread it gets stale real quick, especially if you leave it out. It doesn't have all the what are the preservatives in it and all that good stuff, all the bad stuff. So I want a bread box that's going to keep the humidity in a little bit so the bread doesn't dry out. Now I'm not making a big greenhouse or something to keep it moist, but I just want a cover over it that's not like it's a plastic bag. Usually we just use a Ziploc bag, but that's not a very nice or elegant solution. And with our plastic one broken, um, we threw that out a while ago. So always wanted to, I always like wood projects, so I wanted to make my own bread box. So it's not going to be super pretty, fancy or anything. I'm no master woodworker, but I'm going to make a box that is able to fit a loaf about that long. This is a 10-inch wide, 8-foot long piece of knotty pine. It's kind of the cheapest pine you can get. It's a good project board. I just got it from Home Depot. And I'm going to cut this into lengths. I just have an idea in my head for how I'm going to do it. I got some screws, which I'm going to use for the hinges. I'm actually going to use some finishing nails instead of screws to actually fasten it together, which means I'll probably need to use some glue as well. I'll probably use some white glue. I've got some, let's see if I can pull one out. I've got some nice wood knobs because I think that sort of fits the look of it, since it's all pine anyways. And I've got a couple of hinges. Now I'm going to have a door that instead of collapsing down, if you go like that, if you're, let's say this side is the front, if that makes sense. I don't want one that pulls down because then crumbs get on it and then you put it back up and crumbs fall back into the bread box. So I opted to have one that flips up. But I didn't want you to have to hold it up there while you're getting the bread out. I wanted some kind of a hinge that would hold it up there. So for that, I found this, which is, let's see if I can do it. It's a little high, it's not hydraulic, but it's a little spring-loaded hinge. So it flips one way or the other. It's got this little mechanism there. It's hard to move. But I got two of these, and I think what I'll do is this will kind of sit underneath the board on the inside. The door will be here. And then as this flips up, it kind of flips up and out. And this kind of brings it out and up, and it holds it there. So when you're getting the bread out, you flip the door up with my fancy little wood knob, and then this holds it. I've got two of these. I could probably get away with one, but I think the board would get a little floppy and the screws would work their way out. So I got two of these guys, and I hope that will keep the door open long enough for you to kind of get the bread out, cut a piece, stick it back in, then you can close the door quickly. And that keeps the door nice and clean, and that keeps the crumbs on the counter or whatever cutting board you have, instead of getting into hinges and that sort of thing. If you have the hinges at the bottom, you get a mess of crumbs in the hinges. So that was the idea I wanted to go with. That is all I have for parts. I think this cost me about $30 in all. The two hinges, a knob which actually came in a package of two, and a box of short screws, just Robertson, to actually screw the hinges to the board. So I'm going to go ahead and make something. I kind of have an idea in my head, but I have no idea how it's going to turn out. I'm going to get the kids to help me with some finishing nails, actually, to kind of hammer it together so it's a little bit of their project. And then at the end, I'll probably do some fancying up, maybe some router work to round the edges to make it look like a bit more of a finished product. And we'll see how it turns out. Stick around, and we'll see. So this is your narrated point of the video. So yeah, I just had I think it was a 10-foot long, 10-inch wide board of knotty pine. This is just straight from Home Depot. This is kind of the project pine. I just picked whatever the best piece I could see was. didn't have too many blemishes. What they do is they sell project wood. You know, it's nice, kind of finished, planed stuff that you can make lots of cool stuff with. So I spent some time doing some measuring, figuring some stuff out in my head, and then I had the kids help me here. Take the pieces and help me measure a little bit, and they were actually holding up the other end of the board there as I cut it with my articulating saw. I forget what the name of it is, but yeah. Then I started to piece it together, just dry piece it together, and figure out how it goes together. And I didn't use any glue in this one. I used finishing nails. So I had the kids, I did some pre-drilling to make it easier, and actually it's probably a good idea anyway, so wood doesn't split. I pre-drilled holes and let the kids hammer it in. At Home Depot they have this kids corner where the kids get to go and make some projects, and I did a video about it. But they have fun, you know, they get to hammer nails and paint stuff and glue stuff. So they're here doing some hammering of the nails for me, and putting their own effort into it. And later on we'll see that we all signed the bottom, just to remember that we all kind of built it together. So the next thing I did here, I was doing some rough sanding here, just with my hand, taking out the big corners. I later did use a plane, which you'll see coming up, but I did some sanding, and then I started measuring for the hinges, because I wanted to get the hinges figured out, obviously, before I put any sealant on it, lacquer, varnish, whatever I was going to end up doing with it. And so here I'm just measuring out the hinges. And my first thoughts was to keep the door one solid piece, but that didn't work. So I also tried some hinges, some hidden hinges, and they didn't work properly. And the door wasn't opening far enough, and it wasn't holding up. These are the initial hinges that I used, and that just didn't work out very well. So I actually ended up going to get some other hinges for that job. And here you actually see me cutting one of the big piano hinges. I was going to use that, but that didn't work out either. So here I've got the jack plane. My boards weren't all even or square, so I used the jack plane to take down some of the edges and the corners. Here I beveled the front of the door so that the hinges would wrap around, because the boards were too thick with the over top hinges that we got. We got some antique brass ones, some kind of nice fancy looking ones. And so yeah, I did some of the hand planing there. It gives it much more of a nice kind of handmade look. I mean, the whole thing's handmade anyways, but less power tools and more handmade tools. Wanted to give a little video in here amongst the time lapse of how this thing works. So I'm basically dreaming this thing up as I go, and the problem I found was that with a solid door, it would flip up far too high, and we have an overhang. So that didn't work. And then I thought, well, maybe we could pull it to the side, but that didn't work either, because that wastes a lot of counter space. So what do? I didn't want one that dropped down to the ground, because that catches crumbs and all sorts of things, and then the crumbs fall into the cracks and hinges that you'd have to have there. So what I came up with is this idea, where it bends over like a bendy bus. That's what I like to think of it as. So instead of being full length, you kind of just bend it as you go. It's all one-handed operation, and it just sits over like that nicely. And you can take the bread off, and we have about that much space in front of it to get to take the bread tray out and to cut. You wouldn't cut on this surface. I'm going to stain this whole thing because I want it to be absolutely sealed. And the wood, the bread loaf of bread is not going to come into contact with the surfaces. That's the plan, anyways. I could even cut a little nylon, plastic cutting piece that fit in there perfectly, and that would work as well. But in general, the bread shouldn't come in contact with this. So, but this works. You take the bread out, you cut it, you put it back in with its little breadboard. Let me get the breadboard here. This is a breadboard. I did another video, but this is hardwood oak, just 8-inch wide. I don't know how much. Must be 8-inch by 10-inch or something. It's got my beeswax sealant on it, olive oil and beeswax, and this is the cutting board. nice hardwood, and I created it so it fits right in there, and then of course the loaf of bread right on here. So you slide this out with the loaf of bread, cut on it, and then you can slide it back in, and it fits in there. And when you're done, you just close it up, and this keeps the humidity in, keeps the bread from drying out too quick, and that's it. Here's a view from the side of it. Works pretty well. Now these hinges up here are a little stiff, so if I go like this, it kind of stays like that. But yeah, it's not the end of the world. I can put some olive oil on there to loosen it up, and otherwise it works pretty well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the screws out here. Now that I've got the screw holes, everything is positioned. Now I'm going to do some sanding and some planing with my jack plane to kind of prep it and get it ready for some stain. I'm just going to put some Minwax stain on there. The color of his gun stock or something. Anyways, I'm gonna put some stain on there just to seal it all, because there will be lots of moisture in there, so I want it sealed as much as possible so that the wood is not bending. And I'm gonna do some planing to get rid of some of these inaccurate sorts of cuts that I did with my whatchamacallit blade. I've forgotten the name of that thing. Anyways, it wasn't quite lined up, and so all my cuts aren't that accurate. I'm not a particularist when it comes to that. I'm not a perfectionist. So I'll get my jack plane and just pretty this up, maybe take off some of the corners so it looks like a bit more of a hand-on. This angle is kind of nice because it's a very hand-on sort of an angle. And we went with the antique brass fittings, brass look fittings, like brushed brass, just to give it an old look. I think it'll work well with the stain that goes on it. So yeah, I'll take these off, and I'll sand it all down, get it ready for staining, and then the next process is to put it all back together, and that'll be it. So stay tuned to the time lapse. So here I am doing some final sanding and some planing with my jack plane there, my jack of all trades jack plane, getting it square, taking kind of the edges off, and then fitting the door to make sure the door fit flush there. And then I get into actually adding my hinges there. Here I was actually trying a different stain on a test board. That was just some stain we had sitting under the shelf, but it was far too orange. Here's the kids helping me get the clear, it's water-based polyurethane, something like that, sealant, so we slathered it on. It's not necessarily 100% even, but they had fun doing it. Actually, before we did this, we all signed the bottom of the box as well with the year and the date. You can see the bottom there with our whole family there, which is kind of neat. And so I got to work on the door here, got it all done up with the water-based polyurethane. The kids got their Home Depot things on there. I just did some finishing. I put maybe 2.5, 3 coats on. It seems to be fine, whatever it was that I did there. And then I set it out to dry, of course. And here is the finished product, just putting the hinge on there, getting it ready to take upstairs. I did the finishing touches with the screwdriver just to tighten the screws a little bit. Here is just a real-time walkabout just to see what it is. Well, it's big enough to fit a loaf of bread and my bread box, my bread board that I made out of hardwood before, so it fits it. So you can see the garage door effect, I guess you call it, the folding door, and that really saves a lot of space, and it makes it a unique look. It makes it look like it was a bit, makes it look like I thought about the design beforehand, which I didn't. But yeah, it's a pretty basic thing, just a simple box, but it's going to keep the bread hopefully a little bit more humidified than normal. At least won't let it dry out as fast as it normally would. So that's it. That's the making of the bread box.